All right, so really excited to kick off, or keep the momentum going, if you will, with the session from Overpower. Every time we turn around, we see some new article, some new publication, or some new segment on 60 Minutes talking about AI. If you haven't seen the 60 Minutes segment that actually happened this past Sunday, I would actually encourage you to take a listen. But all that's doing is it's continuing to add to the hype, the excitement, some curiosity, and honestly even some caution around AI. So today or this morning, you guys are going to see and hear a real and refreshing approach to responsible AI. So just for a moment, I'm going to talk about our own personal experience and some of the themes and questions that we get when we talk to executives about AI. The first one, or this first group of people, or theme, if you will, these are your early adopters. So these people are saying things like, you know, Tim, we've been using generative AI. We've found a platform, that we're dedicated to. Very, very few are actually building their own platform. But what they're doing is they're saying things like, well, we're continuing to build our own use cases. We're engineering our own prompts, and we have a lot of people on our team that just kind of get that little sense of dopamine to continue to do that. Some of these organizations have created new revenue streams, whether it's for internal use, external use, as well as just continue to differentiate themselves in their own competitive marketplace. The second group, more curious, but they're kind of waiting for things to develop. So they'll say things like, well, we haven't really been formally asked by our board or by our executives to have an AI strategy right now, but we know it's coming. So we're starting to have conversations, we're starting to think about use cases, and we're starting to have some conversations. The third group is the most cautious, and they're really taking a very cautious approach to this. And they'll say things like, yeah, we're just blocking generative AI until somebody can prove to us that we can use this in a safe manner. So again, that's just our personal experience. But it goes without saying, AI is going to continue to transform every single business unit, every single organization that is in this room and beyond. It's going to change how we work. It's going to impact security. It's going to change how we collect, how we evaluate, and how we interact with our own data. So it's going to be a fun journey to watch here. So with us this morning, we've got Dr. Aaron Shaver. He is one of the founding partners at Overpower. He's not only one, but he's got 2 PhDs. Makes me want to read a book when I go home today. But he's a cyber risk psychologist, and he's also a machine learning and AI fellow at the University of San Francisco. So, Aaron, welcome.
Thanks, Dan. Well, good morning. This is a very committed crew of people on a rainy day to talk about artificial intelligence after I'm sure you've had a wonderful evening post-conference yesterday. So I see a lot of smiling faces and bleary eyes here this morning. I've spent way too long in academia to be a great presenter, so I take more of a teaching approach to the presentations. And today we're going to focus on how we become leaders to build, lead, and manage assisted workforces with artificial intelligence. If you're expecting a laser show of AI today, or lots of FUD or hype around it, you're probably in the wrong room. I'll give you a little background on Overpower.AI. So we started Overpower 5.5 years ago after about 25 years in product development. And we've been in the product development space for quite some time, all the way from back in our NetWare DOS days, all the way through route switch network conversions and cloud and hyperconvergence and high performance computing into artificial intelligence. And that's why I'm as bald as I am, of lots of technology platforms and product launches and upgrades. And about 5.5 years ago, I'm probably going on 6 years now, we had the opportunity to adjust our relationship with technology in a significant way. And we moved away from for-hire or contract product development because we had had a lot of projects. We had just recently developed some significant intellectual property in artificial intelligence, and specifically in computer vision for autonomous vehicles. And we really wanted to move away from the for-hire development, because we had seen a lot of projects that we're invested in that we knew the day we were signing that statement of work, we're never gonna see the light of day as a product, just from that product development experience that we had had. And then we decided that if we really believed in the products that we were gonna develop for organizations, why wouldn't we wanna be a meaningful participant in that? And so we moved to a model where we only do joint ventures with industry organizations for product development. And so over the last 5.5 years, we've co-developed 35 artificial intelligence products with different higher ed organizations, Big 10 universities, auto manufacturers, insurance companies, healthcare organizations, large industrial farms. We work in artificial intelligence across the space. So we've really turned into a new type of venture capital organization where we contribute the resources, the hardware resources, the software resources, and the development resources to bring new artificial intelligence capabilities to life to solve very, very specific problems. And so we have a little bit of a unique perspective on artificial intelligence because we're kind of chest deep in the muck of AI and bringing that, and I see some faces that if you're working in artificial intelligence, muck is exactly where we're at today, of bringing those to see the light of day and make operational impacts inside of organizations. And so we're gonna share some of those experiences and what that looks like inside of organizations. And so a little bit of an agenda. Again, at the end of this, I'm gonna provide a lot of materials that we referenced today. But this is kind of the agenda we're gonna go through, is how we find a focal point for artificial intelligence of what are the problems that we wanna solve and how do we pick those in our organization. How we remain worker-centric in our strategy, how we lead from behind. Artificial intelligence is changing the way we lead with technology in our organization. How our data and our data estate plays into our strategy and our success associated with it. Are we focusing on novelties or necessities? I've sat on quite a few panels and listened to other AI experts, and it seems like the topic du jour is, how do you make a PowerPoint with artificial intelligence? And in my life, that's not a problem I've ever needed to solve with AI. And so we want to make sure that we're solving real world problems with it. How we address challenges in our organization, specifically with artificial intelligence. How we create space in our organization and are able to bring artificial intelligence at different levels of maturity. What our model for acquiring the technology is gonna be. Do we buy it, third-party solutions? Do we build it ourselves? Everybody wants to build an AI today. Nobody knows what that means. Or do we buddy up with somebody in a joint venture to bring some new or novel capability to market? Then how do we get right down to the point of what we're gonna do and accelerate an innovation inside of our organization, and then set specifics for our strategy and what our success measures are gonna be like. So the first thing that I wanna talk about is remaining human-centric. Finding the focal point in our organization. So we strongly believe that the ability to grow and lead a human-centric, AI-powered workforce is going to be the differentiator between laggards and leaders, the haves and have-nots in this next phase of industrial transformation. And that's really gonna be our ability as technology leaders to empower workforces and manage them in new ways. And we're gonna get into some of the models around that. A lot of the focal points that we've seen in artificial intelligence today are very much about the technology. They're about, is it gonna be a transformer model or a BERT model? Are we gonna do computer vision or large language? And we wanna get into the semantics of the technology. And our organizations lose their way on what we're trying to do with that technology. And so we've found a lot of success in the last 12 months, I'll say, when we've pivoted away from the language of the specific technical platforms, and we look at what are our organizational goals that line up with our initiatives in artificial intelligence, and how are we using this next phase of industrial transformation to power that strategy inside of our organization. And we do believe that this is a new phase of industrial transformation. There have been 4 thus far. We believe artificial intelligence is shepherding in this 5th transformation in in industry. And that this is even a bigger wave than the previous wave that we've called digital transformation. We'll say that's kind of a subset of the 4th transformation of industry that started back in the 2000s with the internet. And so as we approach that, this is an opportunity for us to be leaders inside of our organization, inside of our industry, about what does that future look like. And we believe that that is an AI-powered workforce. And there are a lot of challenges in our society today, whether you're in banking and you see deposit operations that are down, or you're in manufacturing and you see the price of material goods and collapsing supply chains associated with that. If it's talent shortages because the generations that are coming through are smaller than the previous generations, and we have a support load with that. We have decreasing expertise. We have decreasing tenure in organizations and that embedded knowledge about our organization. There's a lot of promise with artificial intelligence about how we will solve some of those challenges. So how do we think about artificial intelligence in a human-centric fashion? So we worked with organizations, and like I said, we've been at this for about 6 years now. And when we adjusted our language from talking about, look at what we can do with this large language model, and we started to have a business discussion about artificial intelligence, it made it much more approachable for those who are not deeply immersed, chest deep in the muck, if you will, in artificial intelligence, to have a conversation with us about how do we want to use this new generation of technology in our organization. And as we remained human-centric, these 3 archetypes of goals started to emerge. And so in our organizations, we see assisted workers. And so an assisted worker to us is any individual that we're starting to use forms of weak or strong AI. You'll see that. Weak and strong are not negative or positive commentaries in artificial intelligence. They're just classifications of different tools. And so we see assisted workers as workers who are able to increase their productivity or customer satisfaction through the implementation and use of particular types of artificial intelligence. You could see that as somebody that's maybe able to use a chatbot to help assist customers across a broad set of documentation. You might see folks that are able to use computer vision and to detect failed roofs for an insurance company. But we're able to use the technology, and we're setting goals typically around the 10% range to increase worker productivity by 10%. A lot of that work is happening inside of the knowledge worker space today. So you can think of all the disciplines inside of administration, whether that's planning, finance, information technology, sales, marketing, et cetera. Our organization has certain products that work inside of more of the industrial environments as well. But what's interesting is if you're working in manufacturing or large-scale farming, those teams are actually ahead of the knowledge workers in a lot of ways in their ability to intellectually, emotionally, and operationally adopt automation and new technologies, because that part of our industry has been challenged by automation, and the workforces have been disrupted generations ago in many cases. Artificial intelligence kind of harks the disruption of the white-collar worker and the knowledge worker. So the assisted worker is really where we're targeting efficiencies, trying to gain productivity on a per-user basis. An augmented worker is where we're going beyond that 10% goal of efficiency and productivity gains, and we're really trying to enhance their capabilities so that they can perform functions that they weren't able to perform before. And a lot of times that comes through increasing expertise and democratizing knowledge base or capabilities inside of an organization. And this might be where you take a finance analyst or a SOC analyst that's relatively new in their career, and they're able to perform at a much higher level than they would have been able to perform without artificial intelligence. Then we move to the autonomous worker, and this is where organizations are trying to reduce human toil or eliminate waste. And oftentimes these are roles that maybe are really unhealthy for a human to perform. Maybe it requires them to live a lifestyle or perform functions that if we can remove that, not only is it good for the organization, but it's good for the people that were performing those functions. In autonomous workers, we consider any time an artificial intelligence is able to complete over 75% of the workload and is supervised by an expert human, we're really in the autonomous worker category. It doesn't mean humans are not involved in the workflow or the process, but they're managing it from an expert capacity, and that we've really been able to operationalize significant portions of a workflow that was previously completed by a human. This, in the security industry, this is like, think about, like reading logs, correlating those logs into alerts, responding to those alerts and making decisions about them and making the remediation associated with it. And if you ran a security operations center, that's a large staff of people that has to perform those functions and investigate those. So we work with organizations to set goals across these, and later, as we go through the presentation, we'll talk about how we set goals associated with this in our organization, and then how we get down to the specific use cases associated with it. But another change artificial intelligence brings for us is this idea of leading from behind. And this is not a new idea, but it's new in a lot of organizations. The first motion that we see when a new technology comes out is that we're gonna build a center of excellence and we're gonna centralize the knowledge and leadership around this technology into a group of brains in a jar that we put on a shelf somewhere. And they're gonna think like really deep thoughts about artificial intelligence. That's probably not practical in organizations, especially with some of the trends that we're seeing. One is the folks that can actually build artificial intelligence. I'm not talking about use it, that's different, but actually build this technology. There's very few of them today, and they're extremely expensive. True artificial intelligence developers, I'm not talking about Python developers, I'm not talking about people that can write Next.js, but folks that can build models and weightings, the salaries start at about $500,000 a year. In a lot of organizations, that developer is gonna make as much or more than the CEO of the company in a lot of cases, and there's just not the appetite for that. So we have to look at different ways of doing this. And strong artificial intelligence and casual language models, large language models, and significant computer vision forecasting and predictive models all fall inside of strong AI. We see that accelerating the decentralization of technology in organizations. And the reason that this happens is because strong artificial intelligence breaks down some barriers that we've never been able to break before. And so if you're in a traditional organization, you have a great idea about automation and you need to use RPA, or you want to do challenge some workflows or create some new products or deliver things in a different way, you're gonna have to go to a PMO and probably kick off a project and get a budget and get a data scientist and get a developer assigned to it, and then you're gonna have to wait on a pipeline to have that available. But with strong artificial intelligence, the programming language is English in general. Now we're working to extend that into other languages, but by and large today, the programming language is English, which means that we can give no-code applications to product teams, to business teams that can go after and self-serve solving their own problems, which allows us to decentralize the productivity gains, efficiencies, and novel capability development inside of our organization. But that becomes a huge challenge to organizational leaders that are used to having this very rigid supply chain of technology acquisition, spend control, risk management, governance, et cetera. And so we believe the organizations that are going to lead in artificial intelligence are able to pivot those leadership capabilities into a decentralized model. And this requires a multidisciplinary team. So we want to see governance and management happen alongside AI development, not so much as a critical path item along to getting your product into production. And so we invest with our organizations that we work with and our teams to be able to push these governance capabilities down into a multidisciplinary team that has reporting requirements and is trained on artificial intelligence governance. And I've put some pillars here on the right. This is based off of the NIST risk management framework for artificial intelligence and some emerging industry standards for responsible artificial intelligence governance. And so we invest in our teams versus building a brute squad of people that can sit in a conference room and you can submit their idea to, and they will consider it thoughtfully and then create a backlog for you. We actually invest this capability into the operational teams that use the technology to perform their business every day. And we've had some early experience in this. We've spent the first half of this year doing immersion engagements for large corporations that are trying to lead in strong and generative artificial intelligence. And what an immersion event looks like is typically like 3 or 4 weeks of AI 101, 201, 301, 401, and then a 2-day in-person sprint with largely business teams. We've had anywhere from 10 teams of 5 to 100 teams of 5. 5 seems to be about a right number on a team. And generally speaking, it is the teams of business users that understand intimately the problem space that they're trying to solve that perform the best inside of these immersion engagements. And some of the engagements are even a competition. They compete for prizes and get ranked by judges. And we had an interesting experience with an organization out of Indianapolis a few months ago, or a month ago. I lose track of time pretty easily. And they had a large, I'm going to say about 12 teams, probably 100-ish people in the competition. And they had 2 teams of data scientists and 10 teams of just, I'm going to say like randomly assembled folks from across the organization, including like we had one team that was like the director of HR and the building electrician and a whole like very diverse groups of people. And they were all competing for prizes, and the 3 teams that would win, each person would get about $1,000 worth of prizes. So this wasn't like you get like a free meal ticket in the corporate cafe. This is like you get an extra day of vacation, a $500 Airbnb gift card, like all kinds of stuff. So it was like, they were like actually pretty competitive about this stuff. The 2 data science teams came in 11th place and 12th place in the competition. And what they would do is after 2 days worth of prototyping their solutions in strong artificial intelligence, they had a panel of 5 judges that came from the outside that are industry experts of a variety of different flavors, some AI related, some not. And they were all judged. And the team that had the building electrician and the director of marketing took 2nd place. And their solution is rolling into production in 2 weeks. And what they were able to focus on was something that really could extend the capabilities of their business to a whole new market space. It would allow them to address a customer space of about 65,000 new customers in their market demographic. And so now that organization is investing in teaching that team how to perform the governance activities on top of their own models and solutions, because the demand for artificial intelligence inside of that organization is exploding. And they don't have enough people inside of corporate IT to sit down every day and perform the governance. What we learned, though, is in a lot of cases, those business teams were more committed to the privacy and efficacy of their consumers' information in those solutions than the IT or governance teams were able to be at that more limited scale. And so we'll provide this framework, but we have a training program for teams on how to do their own responsible AI governance as a product team. The next challenge that we see is a data problem, and you hear this probably more than you care to. Look, I either know you or I know companies like yours, and none of you have this problem figured out. This is a problem that continues to be a challenge every day. People make fun of me, but I say your demeanor towards your data will determine your destiny in artificial intelligence. You can't skip this step. And what we see is organizations that fall in one of 2 categories. We're flooded with data. We have it everywhere. We treat it like it's a liability. It's too expensive to host. Really just like dedupe is our friend. We let everybody kind of keep everything everywhere. We're not sure what it's for. It's kind of dangerous because we don't know what's in there. We don't know if it has privacy regulations associated with it. We don't know if there's financial liability, and it's kind of a mess. Then we see organizations that are fueled by data. There are many fewer in this category. I think this is aspirational for a lot. And they treat their data like it's an asset. It's how we make decisions, it's how we take care of our customers, and how we empower our partners to help us be successful. Artificial intelligence represents an opportunity for us to shift our attitude towards our data. In the past, to work with our data for operational purposes, for meaningful business purposes, there were a lot of structural challenges that we had to solve with it. And it was really let's catalog it, let's build an ETL, let's put it in a data warehouse, and then somebody will figure out what to do with this, right? We'll figure out how to use this for meaningful business purposes. And often those challenges, we kind of get into some data cataloging stuff, and that sort of works for a minute, but only in certain areas. And then we sort of build an ETL, and then they change all the time. And then every 3 years, a new, better data warehouse platform comes out, and we start a migration to that. And that's kind of the motion that we've been in. With strong artificial intelligence, the weaker versions of artificial intelligence, this isn't necessarily true, but with strong artificial intelligence, we're not as dependent on a data catalog, we're not as dependent on an ETL, and we're not as dependent on a data warehouse. In some cases, we're not dependent on those things at all. And so we have an opportunity to approach our data differently. One of the things that we see, especially with large language models, the really interesting thing is you can work with completely unstructured data inside of a few minutes. Your users can bring their own data. They can use structured, unstructured, and semi-structured data without a catalog, without an ETL, without a data warehouse. And then what we see is there's this trend that if your users are bringing their data, probably things they weren't even going to tell you they had, if they're bringing their data to these artificial intelligences to work with them, isn't that the time to catalog it? That time to understand what's inside of it, how we're using it? Because that means it represents business value in a lot of cases. And so where we start seeing this go is instead of data first, it's an AI first approach. And then what data is valuable to our organization kind of shakes out into a list after we start using it to solve problems with artificial intelligence. The balance of the data that you have that no one wants to use in artificial intelligence raises a really interesting question do you need it? Does it provide any value, or is that just a risk to your organization? And so we think that we're just right at the tip of, the tipping point of folks starting to move away from these corporate data programs into an artificial intelligence initiative. And then, oh, by the way, while we drive towards AI, we're solving a lot of those traditional data challenges and helping sort out what's valuable to our organization and what's not. Because as we look inside of these companies, it's kind of like an episode of Hoarders of data, if you could imagine that, of just wet magazines and some tipped over piles of newspapers, and that's the equivalent of the data estate in a lot of the organizations that we work with. And so this is an opportunity for us to clean that up, but clean it up in a way that's very business focused. And so I think having a different mentality towards your data is going to be a key to success. So how do we look at, is artificial intelligence a novelty or a necessity? I'm not going to dive into all the companies that 6 months ago were a XDR or an SD-WAN or a fill-in-the-blank acronym company, and now everyone's an AI company. And even inside of our organization, with people that have worked in this for a long time, I'm working with some professors at MSU and Stanford on a project, and we have arguments about what is AI and what is not AI. So don't worry too much about the technical definition. I think a lot of folks today, we see 3 different buckets here. There's the very strong versions of AI that we have today in advanced computer vision and large language models. We have some weaker categories of artificial intelligence that are in image prediction, text prediction, classification, some things like that. But what I had to learn is now just regular old data analytics that we've always done is AI now too. So it depends on where you fall in that category and how you think of it. We think of data analytics a little different from artificial intelligence. But we really want to get focused on, is this just a novelty or is it a necessity for our organization? And so we see 5 different categories, kind of the easiest to the most difficult as we move along. And the first area is, are we able to use it to hyper-personalize experiences for people? So that could be a banking customer, that could be a patient in a healthcare organization. We want to hyper-personalize these experiences. And the question that we try to ask ourselves with this is, if we could treat every one of our consumers like they were our VIP consumer, what would that look like? And these are things that we can do at scale with artificial intelligence that we weren't able to before. The second area we look at is force multiplication. Are we able to take a doctor and allow them to care for more patients because they're supported by artificial intelligence? Are we able to take a customer service representative, have them deliver a higher quality of service to more consumers through the use of artificial intelligence? And there's multiple forms to that. We look for expert in the loop opportunities. So this is that autonomous worker that we were talking about. Can we deploy code that's going to perform a complete job function and then set a supervisor there? Can you imagine that? Having a person in your organization that just supervises autonomous workers. That's a thing that's coming. We don't see a ton of organizations that are there yet. There's aspirations about deploying autonomous workers. There's also more risk with deploying autonomous workers inside of your organization. But we have a lot of folks driving to that goal, and a lot that we do in computer vision with that. High volume capability expansion. These are some goals that people used to try to tackle with RPA that we can do with strong artificial intelligence that allows us to take a non-deterministic approach to a deterministic outcome from a platform and do it at a massive scale. And I'll give you an example of a company that we worked with that does this and some of the impact. So if you have a call center, typically you have folks that do quality assurance on the calls that come into that. And one of these organizations does, they're responsible for the follow-up call after you have a doctor's visit. And that's to make sure that you got the wheelchair or the crutches or the IV pump or the medication, whatever it was that you needed from that. And they make about 65,000 calls a day. They were able to inspect and do quality assurance on about 1% of those calls per day at the cost of $60 to $80 per call. With strong artificial intelligence, we're now able to do the quality assurance on 100% of the calls, and it costs about 18 cents per call to do the quality assurance on that. And the error rate that they've been able to reduce the amount of patients that fall through the cracks associated with that is very significant. And you have to understand that that's making a material impact to someone's health, whether they got the medication or whether they had the transportation they needed or whether they got access to the food that they needed at home. The last area that we see is our novel capabilities. And this is the part everybody wants to talk about. What are the things that artificial intelligence can do that people can't do? And that's still an emerging field. We see organizations, especially in academia, that are building and training models or going after things like materials engineering, drug development, detection for different types of cancers and medical treatments. That's still very, very emerging. And there are organizations that have huge budgets and very focused teams that go after that. But we don't see that as a general purpose application of artificial intelligence. Not to mention the investment of it. And so we see folks, I'll give you just a little terminology about artificial intelligence and how to speak about it in your organization and what it is and what it isn't. But we see everybody wants to train a model. This throws me back to like the early days of the App Store, that Apple had, and it was like, hey, do you want to build an app? You want to build an app? If you're friends with Rick and Morty, there's an episode on that. But now we're like, do you want to train a model? Do you want to train a model? Will you train a model with me? Let's train a model. And you don't want to train models. Training models costs, in a lot of cases, millions of dollars to do. And training a model is the equivalent of having a baby. So if you sprained your ankle and you need a doctor, training your own model is the equivalent of having a baby, raising it through high school, sending it off to college, sending it to medical school, so that you can have treatment for your sprained ankle. There are better ways of doing that. So we moved from model training up to what's called fine-tuning. Fine-tuning is like taking a high school student that already knows how to speak English and sending it into a specialization. So it's a lot less effort, but it's still quite a bit of effort. Then we have model grounding. Model grounding is basically like taking a college graduate and giving them a textbook that they can use to figure out how to address your ankle issue. And so when we think of that, there are different spectrums of investment and different capabilities that we have there. But we're moving well beyond the novelty of creating PowerPoints, having it write poems for us, and just the general chatting. And this has been a unique experience for us because we're going to get into a little bit of the downstream impact in our private equity investments and some of our products that have flowed out of this. But it's been interesting because the first thing we heard is there's privacy and security issues, so we solved a lot of those. And then there was well, which models should we use? So we kind of solved that. And then it was, how do we use our own data with this? And so you have these billions of dollars of technology investment to bring this to a point solution that a user can use. And we'd put it in front of CTOs at major organizations, and you would see these folks just kind of like have a little meltdown. They're presented with a search box that can talk to, I don't know, $25 billion of technology. And they're like, what do we ask it? What do we say? And the answer is we've trained everybody to use any search box like it's a Google search. And so the answer is like, what was the score of the Lions game? Or what's the weather outside? And they would just kind of like have this meltdown associated with it. And we're like, we already solved that problem. This is about like sophisticated task completion. And so we realize there's a big investment that needs to go into organizations, not about what is the technology that sits behind it, but how do we use this to transform our business? And focusing on what your necessities are is a very important piece in being able to determine those. And so what I've done is on the left up here, you can see I've predicted your business strategy for this year, because we all have the same 5 pillars that we use. There's some form of revenue growth that we need, and some form of operational efficiencies, and some form of customer sat, some form of staff engagement and turnover, and then like fostering this culture of innovation. So did I accurately predict your corporate strategy? Okay, all right, so we're all on the same page. I mean, you're special, you're unique and different, but also we're all doing this. So we kind of like move beyond that a bit and talk about, well, what is everybody else doing to embrace those strategies that we have in our organization? And they really fall into 3 categories of challenges for us. How do we use artificial intelligence to engage our consumers differently? How can we bring that VIP experience there? And if that's an activity that you're going to go through in your organization, we've curated a list of challenge statements around consumer engagement that apply broadly across organizations that you can provide to your teams, to your board, to your leadership organization to think about how do we address those challenges with our consumers. The next category is in our company. Inside the 4 walls of our organization, how are we going to adopt artificial intelligence to support our workers, to create operational efficiencies? And we have a whole set of challenge statements around that we'll provide you at the end. And the last area is around our competition. How do we create new and novel products that we're going to offer as an organization? How do we lower the cost of goods sold so that we can deliver new products at a price point that our competition can't touch? And then how do we use that to attract and recruit their customers? And we have a whole set of challenge statements around that. What's pretty interesting is when we think about innovation in an organization, if you went through this same activity 2 or 3 or even 5 years ago, maybe even 6 months ago, depending on what access to technology you have, even if you came up with a great idea about how to operationalize a solution to impact one of these areas of challenge statements, it would likely go into like a 6-month to 6-year backlog of IT development and project implementations that needed to go in place. Strong artificial intelligence really disrupts that because a lot of times we can measure things in days or weeks. I'll give you an example. We're starting to see the consolidation, and just as a little side note, there was a pretty interesting article that came out about a cold shower for artificial intelligence next year. We see that coming, right? You've all seen various different hype cycles of technology, so this isn't new to any of us. But where the cold shower is going is you've seen a lot of like novelty tools pop up over the last 24 months around artificial intelligence. And they're very, very niche-y. Like this is our copywriting tool, and this is our one tool that analyzes a contract, and this is another tool that analyzes an invoice, and this is a fourth tool that we can have it analyze our security logs. Well, if you play that out in your organization to all of the different areas that you need to address challenges inside of these 3 buckets, I mean, are you really gonna have 10,000 different subscriptions to tools that are all $35 a month? Like, that's probably not gonna happen. And so we see this consolidation of tool platforms coming, and we think it's gonna be pretty rapid. We've seen these life cycles happen across a variety of different technologies. Artificial intelligence is growing rapidly. I think it's gonna consolidate rapidly as well. And so as an example, there's a tool out there that's pretty popular that does copywriting. And that's kind of like your HR team can like upload a job description and then be like, write me a job description like this, but for a different job. It costs about $500 a year per user to be able to buy that subscription. We're able to prototype those into prompts that cost about 18 cents to run, takes about 15 minutes for your average HR person to write those prompts. And that when we can do that and empower those teams with access to the technology, we're able to consolidate and disrupt these workflows much, much faster. All right, so we're gonna talk about room for everybody because we believe that with artificial intelligence, there's a place for everybody to start. And so I'm gonna talk through a little bit here on these different archetypes of organizations that we've seen and what this means. This is not intended to be like bad on the left and good on the right. This is just a different scale of needs in organizations, and we choose specifically to partner with organizations across these. There's a reason that we stay involved very heavily in the private equity area because they're thinking about the future on the right. And if you haven't met America, pro tip, if you always follow the money in technology, you'll kind of learn where it's going to go. So we stay connected with that. We also have community hospitals on the left that aren't able to maintain even basic IT services inside of the organization. It's important that we understand how artificial intelligence changes that paradigm for them. So we've put this together over the last 2.5 years, and these are the organization archetypes that we see, and we have outlined the parameters with these, and there's a variety of parameters, and we'll share these with you at the end, of like what kind of budget do you have allocated? What kind of access to talent do you have? What kind of strategic initiatives can be disrupted by artificial intelligence? There's a whole set of parameters that we're gonna provide to you, and you can use those to plot where your organization exists on this. We also see organizations that exist across the spectrum. And it's important that if you do, and we'll get into the end, this kind of flows into our do we buy it, do we build it, do we buddy up with somebody. But we'll see a lot of organizations that have a traditional IT function that exists somewhere between critical and controlled. They got a lot on their plate, focused on a lot of operational problems. Now we dump artificial intelligence leadership and innovation on top of that capability. That doesn't necessarily line up with the organizational goals that we have. So we have a journey of what it looks like to get from critical to controlled, from controlled to emerging. In fact, with critical organizations, we recommend you just skip controlled altogether and go right to an emerging capability because it solves a lot of talent shortage problems as well as access to capital. So we do have journeys for these. We'll share all of those. Most of the organizations and traditional IT teams that we work with, and again, this is in big and small, advanced, and otherwise, exists somewhere in this critical to controlled, controlled to emerging space. We see business leaders inside of those same organizations that have aspirations for artificial intelligence or business goals that don't line up with innovation that happens in a controlled fashion. Controlled fashion is very much this like centralized governance where we have this PMO and this team that's going to take control of your business idea. So we have business leaders that really want this decentralized approach where they have their own embedded technologists, their own team members that are leading their own AI initiatives that have a connection back to a centralized governance team. They're in control of their own budgets and their spend on technology and how they use this to achieve their goals. And that's a little bit more in the emerging and breakthrough area. And then we have organizations down in the transformative and futurist area that this is really like, we have a budget and we have a mandate to spend this budget to disrupt our own business or someone else's business and create new products and new revenue streams associated with artificial intelligence. You may also have initiatives in your organization that exist down at that end of the spectrum. All three of those may be true for you, and artificial intelligence impacts all of them. You may have a board that wants to do a joint venture or a new product that's very specifically associated to your domain expertise. You may have a marketing and sales team or a product team that wants to move faster and in a more impactful way than what you're prepared to do to handle as a technology leadership team. And then you still have all of the other areas of your business that you need to promote artificial intelligence in. So we're gonna provide you a list of these. I highly recommend that you benchmark your organization and that you establish this vernacular where when you're talking about a particular initiative, you know which capability this fits in for your organization. And that's gonna lead us into this, like, how do we access the technology? Do we buy it? Do we build it? Or do we buddy up with some other organization that can help us bring it in? And we've had experiences in all of these, and they're very interesting, and there's no one right answer. So the first area, buy it is the right solution in most cases. In most cases, there's a tool, an operating system that has already solved this particular challenge. We believe that if this is incidental to your domain of expertise in your business, you probably should look at buying it. Because building your own AI tools requires a certain amount of domain expertise and whatever that tool is for. So if you run a healthcare organization and you need an AI tool to disrupt VMware automation, you probably should look at buying one. Unless it doesn't exist today, then you can consider building it. But it really it requires a domain of expertise to train the models, to validate them. And you're gonna have more use cases for AI in your organization that don't relate to your domain of expertise than do relate to your expertise, just in the volume and quantity of tools and solutions that are required. So buying tools and having a strategy for that third-party vendor management and risk management is very important. We're gonna provide you some policies at the end of this that talk about how to evaluate third-party AI tools and what the responsibilities are for that organization and what standards you need to hold them to. And it's outlined very explicitly. The second area in build it is we really wanna look at this as if this problem space would disrupt our business, our value chain. If someone else were to build this, you really need to think about investing in the intellectual property, because if you don't do it, what does your business look like in 5 years or 10 years when someone else does? And now you have to be the consumer of, or you're competing against someone else's artificial intelligence solution that's kind of eating your lunch inside of your business. And that is a considerable investment compared to the buy it. That's more of that, like, are we training our model? Are we fine-tuning a model? Are we creating some kind of intellectual property associated with it? The next area are joint ventures. And we actually see, I would love to say that I predicted this, and this is why we built Overpower in joint ventures, because we saw this need for it, but we're not that smart. We just happen to be like in the right time at the right place. But there are hundreds of organizations that don't have the chops to build their own. And so they need to bring in an organization that not only can handle the technology associated with it, but the commercialization of that platform to make sure that it can disrupt an external market or generate a new revenue stream for the organization. And if you think about these, I imagine in your organization, you're gonna have some teams that just wanna buy a tool to do a thing, like copywriting or something in information technology. You're gonna have some folks in your business that are gonna come to you and be like, wouldn't it be cool if we built our own model together? And you'll be like, what model? And they'll be like, I don't know, but I think we should. And then there's gonna be more of that board executive level that's like, we need to consider new revenue streams for our organization, and how can we use artificial intelligence to monetize some of our domain expertise. There's a place for all of these, and really being able to do that business case evaluation is important. We have a business case evaluation template for artificial intelligence that helps us understand, should we buy it, should we build it, or should we partner with somebody? We'll make that available to you after the presentation here. All right, so we're coming towards the end here, and Sabrina's gonna come up in a little bit and dig into, kind of demo some of the things that we've learned. But we're gonna talk about setting goals for enhanced workforces. So as we think about it, as we're sort of coming, I hate to say it, we're coming to the end of 2023 here, and folks are thinking about, how do I budget for artificial intelligence? And how do I get my arms around this in a way that I can be credible to our leadership team, set some budgets, put some controls in place. And if you approach it from a tooling perspective, it's really hard, because if you raise your hand in the organization, is like, hey, can everybody send me a list of the AI tools you'd like to buy for 2024? You're gonna get a bunch of dumb answers. You're gonna get lists of stuff and tools that might not even exist next year. Nobody's gonna know what kind of efficiency gains are gonna come from it, what the risk is associated with it. So if you haven't already asked that question, probably don't ask that. Also, don't create a 96 question form that you need to fill out. Well, our recommendation is that you focus on these enhancement goals. And so the first one that we see shake out pretty naturally in organizations is converting up roughly 10% of your organization's knowledge workers to being assisted workers by the end of 2024. And so what that means for us is, if you have 1,000 knowledge workers, we're gonna pick 100 of them. We're gonna invest in some education and training with those users. And then we're gonna help them drive towards these 10% efficiency goals. If you work in IT or even executive leadership, you're probably not the right crew to set what that metric is for efficiency. We need to train those teams on how to do that as part of that responsible governance. The next area that we recommend is about augmented workers. So again, the first one's about creating efficiency and productivity. Augmented workers is about creating new capabilities or enhancing a worker's level of expertise. That we identify one functional area of the organization to implement an augmentation proof of concept. And a lot of times we see that happening in IT. We see it happening in cost centers of the organization, where it's we could be much better at security operations or IT operations, or application development is a very popular one, where if we augment our users heavily with artificial intelligence, that we can have a new capability and a new level of expertise in addition to that productivity. And then the final area is to identify and investigate a component of your business value chain that's ripe for disruption by autonomous workers. And those are gonna be those things that are a little bit closer to your domain of expertise and that value chain of your business that could be or will be disrupted by autonomous artificial intelligence in the future. And so we kind of structure this based on effort. The first one, we're gonna get down to business and start implementing some tools broadly across the organization. We are a big fan of the APQC model. The American Process Quality Center outlines what are all the operational areas of any business. Administration's a very popular one. We like to set goals based on that, of how many of these workers come from IT, how many come from finance, how many come from product management, customer service, et cetera, and it allows us to set a lot of goals there. In the augmentation, like I said, a lot of that's coming inside of dev environments and IT environments, and then autonomous is gonna be very related to your specific domain of expertise. So I'm gonna get specific with you about, if I were in your situation and I were gonna walk out of here and I've gotta go back and recommend an AI strategy for 2024, that you're going to take a worker-centric approach, not a tool or technology-centric approach. There's a lot of education and translation that has to happen if you're going to take a tool-centered approach. If you go back and there's $1 million line item for a fine-tuned BERT model in your budget, you've probably gone wrong. If you come back and there's a budget for enhancing productivity by 10%, that's a little bit easier for those budgets to get funded. We want to identify those specific domains to involve. I recommend APQC. We have a list of these domains of knowledge workers inside of an organization. And what are the 5 to 10 first workflows and problem spaces that you should go after? We recommend setting a productivity goal. So is it 10%? Is it more aggressive than that? But what are those productivity gains? We have some pretty good work on a rollout of a communication and education plan for your organization because you're going to need a diverse team of people involved in this adoption. Budget guidance. What's it worth to your organization to have a 10% productivity gain versus how much is it going to cost me to buy this list of tools people think that they want inside the organization? We're going to provide you 2 governance policies. One of them is the governance policy that your AI governance team should follow. Certainly take that and adjust to your preferences. The second one is an AI acceptable use policy. It can be an acceptable use policy that's an extension of your current acceptable use or completely separate. But as we start to decentralize this in the organization, it requires new policies for both that leadership team of it as well as the users of the technology. Plan for a shared governance mechanism. This is what we see, this spreads like wildfire in an organization. If you have a centralized governance mechanism, you're just gonna have a lot of people kicking your doors in because what happens is they see artificial intelligence as a mechanism for them to achieve their business goals inside of their business unit. In a lot of cases, they have financial incentives associated with that, and what I've learned is don't ever be the dude that stands between a business leader and their bonus at the end of the year. And so you're gonna wanna build a shared governance team around this. Establish approved tools to get started. If you don't provide a library of tools that are safe for use in your organization, they're gonna go around you. And we see this happening a lot. It's worse than the shadow IT that we had with cloud and SaaS. And people are doing whatever it takes to get their hands on the tools that they need that they think will make them successful in their job. So establishing a set of approved tools that meet your security, compliance, regulatory objectives and provide them access to safe prompting, modeling, and use of your own data is something that you need to sort out early in your strategy. Commit to training, a training investment per worker. So if you pick 100 workers or 1,000 workers or 10, whatever size organization it is, you're gonna need a training investment in that, whether that's bringing in outside people, having them attend our classes on it, watching YouTube videos, going to a boot camp. There's gonna be worker training associated with this. Promote your sprint teams with a focus on specific business initiatives. Try not to get too hunkered down on, we love Palm 2, or we love Falcon 7DB, or we love any particular tool. Get teams focused on a business initiative. They may have to use multiple AI tools. But then we really believe in this, that whole lead from behind idea is that you can sponsor and lead an AI immersion engagement for your organization. This allows people that opportunity to capture your vision for artificial intelligence, to look at their own business problems and how they use artificial intelligence to think differently about their work. It helps you set this vernacular around a worker-centric AI strategy, get them immersed in some of these tools that you're providing as a standard platform to them, and then really become advocates and champions of these initiatives back into their day-to-day in the departments that they work in. We see that a ton after these immersion engagements of those folks that are now in a particular they're in a staff meeting, there's a particular problem, and now you have this person that participated in this immersion engagement that's like, hang on folks, I think we can do this differently. I learned some things about how we can work differently with artificial intelligence, let's go get those folks that led that immersion and see how we can start to access these platforms to think differently. And that's how we can make rapid and manifold innovation progress inside of our organization versus trying to keep it in a center of excellence. The last thing is to commit resources to accelerate the solutions. Nothing kills worker morale and productivity like this big immersion engagement that you have, and then you like kind of gobble up all the ideas and we're like, get back to the salt mines, as John puts it. And in maybe a year or 2 or 5, if we liked your idea, we may, as benevolent overlords, come back to you with something that you can use. So be prepared after that of how are you gonna bring these solutions into production in a safe way so that you can continue that culture of AI innovation and moving forward in the organization. So Sabrina's gonna come up and I'm gonna give you a little bit of a backstory. So like I said, we've spent a lot of time in artificial intelligence. It's a mucky space, and we've recognized a lot of challenges early. And so you can come on up. We've invested really heavily in a platform that allows us to solve a lot of these challenges in an organization pretty quickly. And so you can go ahead and bring up your, so she's gonna do an intro. So what we did is we ran into a space where there's a lot of privacy and security concerns around artificial intelligence. We were like, we'll be really cool. We have some old IP about real-time privacy detection. We'll put that on a platform, and we quickly ran into other roadblocks like access to models, ability to work with your own data, prompting of models. And so we've put a huge investment into one of our portfolio companies called Prompt Privacy. And Sabrina's gonna do a little bit of a demo and a walkthrough for you about how you can use this as part of an immersion engagement for your organization to provide a platform that is safe in a decentralized way. And so this is one of the first publicly available AI operating systems. And these are really becoming operating systems about how you access technologies in safe ways with cost controls for your organization. So take it away, Sabrina. Thank you.
Thanks, Aaron. So for those of you I haven't met yet, my name is Sabrina. I have a great honor with Overpower leading the client engagement team. And one of the experiences that I want to share before I dive into the demo is I've spent a career not in technology, but rather in leading large teams or consulting with large teams about how to make changes to their business, their processes, and their culture. And one of the things that I've learned in my time in helping to build products is that when we think about true culture change, true process change, and true change amongst our employees and how they approach their work, we often leave engagements just like this. And I know this because I was an executive consultant with a list of things that we need to do. And we're gonna go back and we're gonna do them all ourselves, and we're gonna build teams around it, and we're gonna make the change, and it's gonna happen. And unfortunately, it often dies. And I've lived that pain as a leader, as a part of teams. And what being involved in this organization has taught me is that really we see changes come to fruition when we put the power of a product in people's hands. Whether that's this product I'm about to show you or another, having a worker-centric approach and allowing them to lead us into battle, so to speak, results in way better outcomes. And so throughout this process of working on building out this operating system, it's really highlighted for me, and I think it will for you as you go on this journey, that the power of a product can help move your organization forward so much faster when you pair that with business goals and business strategies. And so I'm really honored to show you Prompt Privacy today, give you a little bit of taste of what it offers, and show you how it connects to the needs that Aaron spoke through today. So as he stated, we kind of approached this in the beginning as like, okay, well, there's a hype cycle around AI, and we're going to need to protect our sensitive information. And so, we started off with saying, how would we make sure that we could not input or output sensitive information? And so we actually built a real-time privacy filter. And so that real-time privacy filter allows us to interact with large language models in ways that protect our sensitive information. And what I'm going to show you is that there are a bunch of enterprise security controls when we talk about a shared governance mechanism that have been built into an operating system like this so that every worker is managing their ability to use generative AI in a way that matches our security policies as organizations. And I'm able to manage those for my entire enterprise. And so what we're able to see here is that first, it comes right to those privacy settings. Now, if you're a true rebel, if you're like, all sensitive information is a go, you can turn off the security levels and allow any information to be input. We do see some cases where people want to go about that, but we are risk nerds by trade, so we don't recommend that. We do have the basic default settings that are just low. You're going to see that's a lot of the basic information you'd want to protect. You also have your medium and your high settings. And what you're going to see is that we're able to add in functionality to protect things that are civil rights issues today, such as sexual orientation or political affiliation. And so this helps you have a shared governance mechanism to make sure that it matches, the tooling you're using matches the policies and the controls that your organization needs. A couple of other things, if you have cool undercover projects, you're able to add custom keywords to keep from being input or output into that system. So if you're running a Black Ops kind of project, you're able to put that name in there and keep it protected from being input or output. The other cool things, developer options, if you're a development nerd, and I know there's a couple people in the room that have used this, you're able to access an API key and develop your own potential platforms, autonomous workers on top of this platform. The other thing that we found is that, to Aaron's point of, are you really going to buy 10,000 different tools and manage the billing subscriptions for each of those? I mean, that sounds like a personal nightmare for me. And so our team took that into consideration of how would we normalize and consolidate the billing function from a perspective of we want to provide all of the capabilities that you would get out of these individual tools and then be able to manage and consolidate your payment on the back end. You're able to, as an administrator, manage all of the different models, and I'm going to show you a little bit about that model marketplace in the front end and how to use it. But you're able to manage what things and models that the organization or your corporate tenant has access to. So from our Azure ChatGPT 3.5 model to some of our fine-tuned models that you see here that are on specific domain expertise, you're able to help your organization and yourself access those different tools. And so I'm actually going to go back here and give you a little bit of an overview. So the second problem that we solved out of after the governance thing, so people were like, cool, like solve the privacy need. Now I want to be able to use ChatGPT 3.5, or hey, DeepL came out and I want to be able to translate things, or I saw this new image generation model and I want to be able to do that, but they're going to multiple different places to do those things. What we have here is model marketplace, and so I'm able to, based on the function or the question or the information that I need to use or access, I'm able to choose the most appropriate model. So I'm an Azure Chat 3.5 fan. I, by nature, love contextual friendly answers. Chat 3.5 allows me to do that. If I want direct, concise answers, I'm gonna switch it over to a model like Palm 2. For my security folks in the room, which a lot of you are, we have a fine-tuned Overpower SecOps model that is based in NIST 853 and in other forms of research to help provide security-specific answers. So I'm able to select which models here. The next thing after that was like, people were like, cool. To Aaron's point, like, what's the weather? And we moved on from that pretty quickly from the perspective of people wanted to do two things. They wanted to be able to use their own data. Like, how cool is it to be able to ask my own data questions or build work augmentation based on my own information? And so we were able to solve that need by introducing something called Vector Vault. So how many of you in the room know what retrieval augmentation is? Right, okay, yeah. So I'm gonna simplify that because that's normally the response I get. We're able to vectorize data, your own data or your organization's data, and secure it in a vault that is NIST 853 and HIPAA compliant, and be able to allow users to leverage that information in very productive ways. And so I'm going to demonstrate that here. You can see I have a vault here, and I'm able to simply select that vault and just tell me about the AI immersion. And so I've selected Azure Chat 3.5. I could have a vault with a bunch of NIST 853 policies that I run the SecOps model over, and that's going to allow me to get the best potential information out of my own information and actually do and complete some tasks associated with that so that it's not just telling me things, but it's actually helping me do my job. I am sometimes really good at multitasking, but sometimes not. So allow me to type there. So we're able to build and manage multiple vaults. They come in both individual vaults, and you can also have shared vaults with other teams in the organization. And you can see here it's gone ahead and taken my own data from that AI immersion documentation I put in that vault, and it has built me an email that I'm able to then copy and paste, make some fine-tuned edits, and send on. So there's multiple things that this can do. The thing is not everyone's a prompt engineer. Prompt engineering is actually a skill set, but it's a skill set we can all learn, or it's a skill set that we can assist with. And what we've done is been able to build suites of pre-engineered prompts that allow people that don't have the time to go learn to be a prompt engineer and use our worker-oriented platform in a very no-code manner. The code here is English, right? So whether it's I'm submitting a prompt here, or I'm using what we have, which is called Prompt Studio. And so what we've done is we've built out these prompts that people need to use to augment their work and to assist them every day into a library. And so you'll see there's a few categories here that I'm able to show. This aligns with that APQC model that Aaron referred to, where each kind of category has a specific set of pre-engineered prompts that have been requested or most helpful to the users we've worked with. And so these get built out and continue to get built out. What you're looking at is kind of just the default set that are input there. And what I want to highlight is this huge cybersecurity section. This has been one of the most interacted with sections because it's been the most requested. And what we're able to do here is I'm going to initiate a malware incident response. So I'm in the SecOps team, right? Something happens, and I need to respond pretty immediately. We've seen the skill gaps in these teams, and we've seen time pass on because people didn't know how to respond, and things get missed. And so these prompts really help people respond pretty immediately. And so we simply click open, and it's going to return me to my chat here in a minute, and it's going to actually treat me like I would be working with an expert. And so if something were occurring, and I'm going to pick on Bob because he's sitting in the front row, instead of being like, hey, Bob, something's happened, but I don't really know what to do, it's going to help me get the basic information. So I've initiated the malware incident response here, and you're going to see it's going to ask me some questions. I'm able to interact with it and provide it information back so that it's able to walk me through step by step what things I should be doing and begin escalating that, and even provide me an email right off the bat to send to my users to help begin mitigating that incident. So this is just one example of how, when we think about building productivity goals for our employees and for our organizations, this right here saves probably more than 10% of my time in security operations. This helps me get to more exact answers faster, and actually makes me a true expert as a person in that organization. A lot of times when we think about our analysts or our teams, they delay things or they get stuck in paralysis by analysis because they don't want to be wrong. They don't want to go to Bob and say, well, I don't really know what to do. Right? They want to be an expert. And when we have these packaged prompts that are identified ways of helping them move forward, plus fine-tuned models or expert models paired with that, they get to continue to be an expert, and they're actually bolstered. And to me, from an organization's perspective, that really is empowering people. And I'll be honest, this generative AI has really changed my own life because I use this every day to augment my own work. And we watch through these immersions, people really latch on to using generative AI to do the basic tasks that take up so much time of their each and every day. So there's a lot of cool things here. I'm going to go ahead and clear this, but one of the things I want to say is that this is kind of just the beginning for us. There's other things in here. You know, we have enterprise logging and security controls in the back end that you can see all of the prompts that have gone through, what model ID, what it was, and each log ID as well. So we're able to secure that and understand what's happening on the back end. But as we move forward, there are other things that we're looking to do. You know, this is just the beginning for us. We are actually moving into a space of no-code data science. So Aaron referenced that he learned that data analytics is now artificial intelligence. I'm pretty sure he actually learned that from me and my team because I thought data analytics was AI at one point. So we are moving into no-code data science now, which allows us, with the click of a button, to take large data sets in real time and provide real-time analytics back just with the use of a generative AI model, which isn't really doable today. We're also moving into building out more and more of these expert models paired with prepackaged prompts so that as you choose different domains of expertise in your organization to become augmented, they are able to come right in and leverage the top 3 to 12 prompts that would make them more productive, aligned with your goals that you've set. We're also moving into a really cool yet scary space of AGI. And so I know that Aaron's interested, if anyone's like an AGI nerd, which is artificial general intelligence, he's open to talking with you about that and helping explore that together. So again, we have a lot of things here. This is a full operating system. One of the ways that we support and help people is to provide resources along the way. And I'm going to try and get out of full screen here. I don't think I can. There we go. As you leave today, and I know we want to save time for questions, Ryan, so I will keep moving. As we leave today, I want you to think about some homework. You know, we've talked a lot about leading an organization of assisted and augmented workers, and I want you to move forward with a couple of things. You know, you can go right to promptprivacy.com and you can set up a prompt privacy account and begin playing with an operating system to understand what that looks and feels like. Additionally, we offer a series of free micro workshops, which are 1-hour trainings focused on specific expertise, like cybersecurity. We have one tomorrow, where people are able to log in and gain free access to understand what it means to be assisted in their job and learn to get comfortable and see how safe it can be. You know, one of the cultural things we need to remember is that our users are also a little scared of AI.
Good presentation, guys. So 23 years ago, we experienced the dot-com bubble burst. And lately, it seems like there's new AI companies every day. So do you predict anything similar to that 23 years ago with AI?
Yeah, is my mic on? Can you hear me? Okay. We do. We think 2024 is like going to be that cold shower I talked about, that we're moving out of this hype cycle of it pretty quickly. We're going to be on the slope of disillusionment, if you're familiar with that. And it's really going to be about leading our organizations through that. But just like with the dot-com burst, which many of us were part of, there does become this more measured and emerging approach from that, of a gentler slope. And I think that's what we're talking about today, is how do we move past kind of this collapse piece, you know, the burst and collapse of it, into a meaningful progression through our organization where we can set year-over-year goals to accomplish things that matter to us versus just like whiz-bang tools that we're going to experience. They're just all ready for more coffee.
All right, I'll throw out a few. So we talked a little bit about the security controls, and it's cool that you guys have those standards. I want to make sure that the entire room hears this. They can customize their own security controls based on their own organization needs. They don't have to just use this as a standard.
Yeah, we have intellectual property detection as well. It's not in the free trial account you'll sign up for, but we do IP detection as well, as you can customize all kinds of things in it. But I mean, we've done this for a long time. Those privacy settings are pretty darn close to what you're going to want for each different type of organizational demographic that you have.
Oh, go ahead.
Just yell.
Governance?
Yeah, yep. So like we said, we're gonna provide some of the governance policies that are out there as well. There's a pretty robust approach to what the governance teams need to do that are included in there, what the membership is that's associated with it, what their responsibilities are associated to, is it a third-party solution? You have a set of governance responsibilities with that. If it's a first-party solution that you have built, you have a much, much broader set of governance responsibilities associated with the efficacy, the ethics, and responsibility of that model. We do host a leadership class just on AI governance and what it means to be part of a governance team. And some of that will be in the schedule that's there as well, where we really take that governance policy, the NIST risk management framework for AI, some research done by Deloitte, and then as well as some of the EU best practices that we think are gonna be turned into some regulatory standards, and bring that all together into a governance leadership training plus the policy work that goes with it.
Yeah, this is just a fantastic talk. Thank you guys for sharing all of this. As you were talking, I know a lot of AI out there integrates with other large language models or is exposed to the internet in different ways. And you have some really good vaulting in place for protecting PII. But then there's also company-specific intellectual properties that we also need to make sure aren't getting just distributed out into the large language models out there.
Yeah.
Do you have protections for that, like
We do.
customizations around that?
Yep, so we have intellectual property protection, and the more data that you put into those secure vaults, so we actually can detect and flag that, and then we do what's called an approximate nearest neighbor search, and anytime we match prompt data that's proceeding to a public model that has a certain distance vector match to the intellectual property data that you have inside of the vaults, we're able to stop that from leaving the ecosystem. That's kind of that secure boundary. We also have the ability to route it to privately hosted models that we host, you host, or we host on your behalf, so that you can give that seamless user experience where they may be pointing an engineering diagram or a set of assembly instructions or meeting minutes that have intellectual property in there. Instead of just rejecting that prompt back, we're able to route it in real time to a model that's safe for work with that intellectual property or that sensitive data. Does that answer your question? Okay.
Aaron, I want to expand on that because you and I were in a conversation where OpenAI was actually down, like on a particular day, and we were able to talk to this this potential client on saying, well, cool, like the prompt privacy platform is agnostic. I think you guys just saw that based on based on like the drop down. But the cool thing about all of that is if OpenAI or any other kind of model is experiencing an outage, organizations are allowed to move that data model or some of those prompts, if you will, to another model to continue using it. So you don't have to worry.
So I'll touch on that a little bit because as we kind of come out of the hype of artificial intelligence, there's all kinds of things that we all know we need to be doing around business continuity and availability that just aren't fundamental components of public AI models today, or probably even private models that you're hosting. And so I started in research and development at Nortel on their 8600 route switch platform. And if any of you know what that is, then you're as old as I am. And that was, for me, that was, and you guys are laughing, somebody knows what I'm talking about here. And so I'm a route switch guy early on in my career. So the first thing that we did was built a real-time prompt router so that we can direct these workloads around, because sometimes you may want to chain multiple models together. You want to take a no-code data science analytics output, chain it into a large language model to converse with it, and pass the output of that into a computer vision model that's going to perform a function. So the core of the prompt privacy platform is a real-time prompt router, which normalizes all of the API taxonomies and billing structures of all of the models that are in the ecosystem, which means that we can use it for disaster recovery, so that if you have a production functionality that's using a public Claude 2 or a private Llama 7DB model, that if there's a performance or availability issue, we have our own routing protocol that will do load balancing and redirecting of that prompt activity across models.
All right, oh, somebody have, who are you pointing at? Oh, Bruce.
So I was wondering if you had any examples of out-of-the-box ways that customers have used AI. Not exactly novel, just something that's extremely helpful that most people really wouldn't think about.
Do you want to go?
I think one of the out-of-the-box ways that really,
Mike Runner.
One of the really out-of-the-box ways, which isn't a novel experience and actually really impactful, was the ability to build an interactive training assistant for agents. So when we think about traditional training methodologies, it requires pulling people off the floor or out of their normal work life for a period of time. And this particular organization, an insurance organization, was able to take a generative AI model and turn the bot actually into an evaluative training assistant. And so they would go through a series of interactions and it would evaluate the agent at the end based on their criteria for success, based on what was appropriate, professional, helpful. And this organization has thousands of agents out there. And so this force multiplication and also a very hyper-personalized employee experience was very impactful to them. It also helped their HR department save a ton of time. And so that was a little bit out of the box from my perspective. I know there's other research areas.
We have a no-code capability that allows users to interact with their messy structured and unstructured data without any ETL function or normalization. You can just prompt it in English. And we had provided prompt privacy to the person that kind of runs technology for a school of veterinary medicine. And I was kind of thinking they might use it to like write some emails or, ask it some questions about, some structured data sets. And I think within about 36 hours, they had prototyped a longitudinal medical record for dairy cows. Because you get all this telemetry data from all of these different producers and feed inputs and how much milk they produced, and they've never been able to solve that ETL challenge of assembling all of that data into a longitudinal record. And they were able to use the no-code capabilities of generative AI to, in real time, create the semantic joining of all of those different data schemas into a longitudinal record. So that's one example I think that we would never come up with, and why it's important to put that tool in the hands of other folks. The other thing we're starting to see emerge is the need for very small models. The hype is around very big models. The bigger they get, the longer the context window, the slower they get. And so we have an organization that's using one of our very high performance models where they can do sub 100 millisecond inference on text messages to make sure that those text messages are safe for work, sound professional, and are evoking the right customer service relationship. And those are things we would never come up with ourselves. Those are business users that are trying to solve a problem themselves.
May have time for one more. Oh, Andy, there we go.
The data analytics piece is amazing, right? And so I think the question that I have, you made the statement that we might see moving away from the data programs and the traditional ETL and so forth, right? Especially with the unstructured data. But I guess I see it more where they're going to live side by side. And I'm trying to figure out, I can go to 4 different vice presidents in finance and ask them what our revenue was for last year, and I'll get 5 different answers.
Yeah.
One of them will actually be accurate and right.
Maybe, if you're
right?
lucky.
Maybe.
Yeah.
So I guess, what do you see as the structure that you put around that type of analytics that may ultimately, that people are going to make decisions based on that, right? How do you make sure that that's being done in a way that is not going to lead to a wrong path.
Yeah, so the first part we had to solve was the no-code data science piece of how you can run the analytics on it. The part that we have in alpha is really around the progeny and lineage of that information, of did somebody upload a piece of information that's duplicative or outdated compared to the rest of the information that's inside of the data estate. And then to be able to summarize that information both semantically and idiomatically to understand when we prompt it with an English question, which data set is going to be the most accurate associated with the type of prompting that we're putting in. We can do that work as humans. I just haven't seen anybody successfully complete the full indexing and cataloging of their data and then maintain that lineage in a sufficiently real-time fashion that people are going to get correct answers out of it. And so that's kind of what you're working on is like the inception of, like these are AIs inside of AIs doing work for AIs. And that's where we get more towards like probably a poor man's artificial general intelligence where it can decide which data, which model, which prompt for you to solve the question. We have prototypes of that, but I think we're still probably 8 to 12 months from that being production ready.
Awesome. Round of applause. Thank you so much, Aaron and Sabrina.